to wherever you are. I'm Harrison,
I'm Farhan.
and this is the newly named Technicolor Robotic Hot Air Balloon. I had a proposition, if something that would be interesting for us to discuss. Who's your favorite superhero and why?
The first superhero that comes to mind is Superman. And I don't know why, but I seem to have brought Superman into previous conversations. And one of the things I found to be interesting about Superman is he was apparently a normal, run-of-the-mill type of person on Krypton. I believe that's the one they came from.
Yep, he was from Krypton.
Yeah, and however, in a different context, Earth, different planet, he has superpowers. Things that were ordinary one place become extraordinary in another place. I like that idea, and I've always so I've built a career in the technology area. But but the way I've always looked at my career and my interests is that, okay, technology is kind of a platform for me to jump off and learn about various other types of sectors, businesses, areas. And as I've been traversing all these various sectors and these different domains and so forth, I've found that I'm always looking for things that I might discover some insights or methods, approaches within one context, and I'm always asking myself, is there something that I can actually apply somewhere else, and that might actually be a superpower in another place? So maybe that's a long-winded answer to your question, but yeah, Superman.
Okay, that's interesting. It's funny because having a teenager now who's into comic books means I get to be back into comic books, and Superman isn't as interesting as he used to be because he's just too good at everything. It's sort of the same problem that Captain Marvel has in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. She's so overpowered and she's so good at everything that during Infinity War, they had to have her off screen doing other things because if she showed up, she just would have, won. I think in regards to Superman, the most interesting thing about Superman is that a little fragment of his home planet is all it takes to completely drain and destroy his powers. And I think there's maybe a parable or a story there about how our homes, our homes can be our strength, but also can pull us back down to earth. My favorite superhero is Doctor Strange. And I don't know how much you follow Marvel Cinematic Universe. My favorite thing about Doctor Strange is his superpower isn't so much being the master of the mystic arts, but Doctor Strange loses just about every fight he gets in. In fact, in the first Doctor Strange movie, he defeats Dormammu by just putting him in a time loop and letting Dormammu kill him over and over again until Dormammu just got tired of killing him. And so the thing that I admire about Doctor Strange, other than the fact that Benedict Cumberbatch is super cool, is just that Doctor Strange just gets beat up all the time and still manages to get back up. And I think that's a really interesting. I think that's a really interesting and powerful message.
I agree. I completely agree. Absolutely. And yeah, what's also, I think, I was just thinking whether it's Superman or Doctor Strange, you said,
Yep.
is or any other superhero or not superhero, that we tend to look at these people or whatever you want to call them from a kind of a single-minded perspective. when in fact they are multi-dimensional. And if you take a moment to look at a superhero and inquire in terms of what could be also very interesting is sometimes you end up seeing this come up in the comic strips or even movies, would be kind of a backstory of associated with some other aspects of their life, which are not so blaring out at you initially. And I think there's a lot of interesting things to be learned about that. And I would be interesting to know what are some of the other dimensions of Doctor Strange? What are some of the other dimensions of Superman? Sometimes we get glimpses into those, and those could be even more interesting than the primary thread.
So I think that part of the popularity, particularly during Phase 3, it's my opinion. I'm not a media critic, but it is my opinion that Marvel has been struggling since the end of their Phase 3 because their Phase 3 was so good, and it's really hard to replicate that level of quality because they put so many years into building such a complex story. But there's this really poignant part in a movie called Endgame, which was the second part of Infinity War, where after it's all over, they go to New Asgard to go see Thor, who's completely jacked Chris Hemsworth, and he's gained 100 pounds, and he's just sitting around the house drinking beer and playing video games all the time. And they come in like, Thor, what happened to you? And he was defeated, and he didn't know how to handle defeat. And then, so at the beginning of this, they travel to wherever Thanos was, and he just kills him, and that doesn't bring him the closure that he thought it would. And so a big part of that is sort of fat, depressed, desperation Thor kind of coming back to his normal self. I think it's part of the success of Marvel in the movies is that they've made the superheroes more human.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we can hopefully learn and bring our awareness back to some of these kind of things where there's a lot more to what meets the eye around people.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a good thing. And once again, back to, we're not robots, we're not machines. We are we're much more complex than that, and complexity is not a bad word.
No, it's not. I was thinking while you were talking, I don't know who the patron superhero of tech would be. I mean, it's easy to say Tony Stark and Iron Man, who is my son's favorite. Yeah. And my daughter's favorite is Spider-Man. But it's easy to say Tony Stark, but I'm not entirely sure that's fair or fitting. Another thought that I've had is in we look back. There are periods of time when we look back, and like the French Academy, when Fourier and the Bernoulli brothers and all these folks were churning out the foundations of what we consider to be modern mathematics, and you wonder what would it be like to be a fly on the wall there. C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien used to meet at a pub. What would it like to be like in the cheap seats, sitting next to overhearing a conversation between C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien? So I wonder, what are the conversations we're having today that people in the future will say, man, I wonder what it would have been like to have had an office in that organization back in 2020. And they're probably not the ones who are in the news. I don't think, and I don't know anything about him personally other than stuff in the media that I ignore. But I don't think it would be terribly interesting to sit in an office with Elon Musk. I think that the time that would have been interesting has long passed. So and I've been talking a little bit, so I'll ask you to respond to that. But that's one of the things that I wonder is like, what are the things happening today that people in the future will say, man, I wonder what it would have been like to sat in on that.
Yeah, yeah, that is, and we, even for a second or so, if I think I've been compelled to kind of think about, not only think about that, but go beyond the thinking about it and try to feel what that might feel like for a second.
Yeah.
And I think with taking focus away from some other luminary, you can do this we can do this with our previous selves.
Yeah.
And say that, okay, what was I doing in those days? And what did the world look like? I think there's, and like some of the things that I do think about is that even in my career progression, the kind of things I was attracted to in the late 80s weren't the kind of things that most people were doing. I mean, did I care about whether most people were doing this or not? No, that wasn't the thing. I was just interested in those things, and I pursued those things. But now, when I reflect back upon that, and I see that, the world, nobody was using a browser, nobody was on the internet, or only a handful of people were on the internet. The Netscape browser hadn't been invented yet. But there was this young person who didn't know much about technology, but was curious, and didn't have a lot of resources, and was compelled to go buy a thick book. I remember an O'Reilly book, thick, small book with really small type on it, about the internet. The title was The Internet. And I bought that. The reason I liked that book was that it had a whole bunch of it walked you through it with tools and everything. And, well, you do this and you can do that, and that kind of thing. It was instructional kind of thing. And I took that. I bought a computer. I got my university to allow me to dial in. Nobody else was doing this. They had to set it up for me, but they did it. And I used my book and learned how to FTP, Telnet, this, that, the other, traverse the internet, find user groups and things like that. This whole world that was restricted to pretty much ARPA and academia and so forth. But I found a way in, and I got intrigued by this thing. Most people in the world weren't doing that kind of stuff. But it's interesting to kind of remind oneself is what did the world look like at that point that somehow you were compelled to do this kind of stuff. And I'm sure you've got some thoughts in terms of your career, in terms of having done some interesting things.
Yeah, I more than anything else, I tend to be very, very spring-loaded towards forward movement. And the forward movement doesn't have to go directly in the way you thought it was going to go, but the most important thing is to be moving forward. And when you're not moving forward, that can be frustrating very quickly. The way I've been feeling, particularly this week with business ventures and a lot of interesting things happening around that, is I was on a call yesterday where somebody said, "Hey, we want to work with your AI company," and I'm scratching my head thinking, I didn't set out to make an AI. I mean, I guess I sort of, long way around, Ahmad and I have made an AI company, but that was not our intention.
Yes.
When we got started, our intention, as you know, because you were there at the beginning, was to build stuff and to build useful stuff. and it just turns out that AI happens to be the direction of building useful stuff. But I think that there's this great getting back to superheroes. There's this great line in the first Deadpool movie where he's at the bar, and the bartender said, "Hey, this guy handed me this card. You should go talk to him." And Deadpool says, "I don't want to talk to that guy. Why should I do that?" And breaking the fourth wall, the bartender says, "I don't know. It might advance the plot." And there's a lot of power in that. There are a number of things that you do where you just say, "I don't know what's going to happen. It's probably going to advance the plot. So let's see." Yeah. When you're talking about dialing in the old days of the internet, did you read a book called The Cuckoo's Egg?
No.
Okay. It's a story about the first hacking ring, and they were discovered by an academic whose funded job while they were working on their PhD was to do the billing for the computer center. And they kept having these overages of like a nickel and 15 cents. And so he spent all this time, and in the course of reconciling the bills, discovered a computer hacking ring.
Yeah.
Like the world's first known, I guess I should say.
That's super interesting. It really is.
Yeah.
It's just I mean, as you mentioned, people, you founded your AI company and this and that, the other, and the fact that you just kind of followed your curiosity and had a initial intention that continued to evolve over time and continues to evolve. It's not static at all. What I'd say is that how you expressed it, I would say that my ventures, what I even mentioned earlier on, weren't even that ambitious. So it's like I just started exploring and following a curiosity of mine, which seemed to starburst into various kind of things, and lots. But at the same time, keeping in mind, for me, it's kind of like, okay, you begin somewhere, you learn things along the way, I just naturally keep a awareness which is beyond what's happening there. I'm always observing myself, and I'm also looking at this stuff that I'm asking myself, I'm learning this and that, the other, and is there any use for this thing? How can I make it get out of the clouds and become terrestrial? I'm just using it loosely. And so it's walking or running or this and that, the other, literally on the ground. So it's that's a natural thing for me. And so getting stuff done goes, I think we've covered this in other topic areas, is really not one or the other. It's for me, it's a lot of different things, and people get to getting stuff done from so many different perspectives, and I find that fascinating.
So the other thing that this touches on is the idea. I firmly believe that there's no such thing as wasted work. There's work that is not ready yet. I have a colleague who's doing a lot of work in weather, and my sense is that the work that she is doing is very good, but that the world, the organization, is not ready to absorb what she is producing. So she is in the unfortunate position of being out ahead.
Yes.
And that's a really hard life lesson, is that being out ahead can sometimes be worse than being behind. Because when you're out ahead, when you're behind, people say you're behind, but they can understand what you're doing. When you're ahead, people say, I don't know what you're doing, and I completely don't understand it. And organizations that are not run by savvy people will just conclude that you're wasting your time.
Great point. And I would say that I can speak from personal experience. I've felt that I've always been out of sync. And what I'd say to this is also, if you can recognize that as early as possible, and be aware of that, and have a intention to kind of capitalize upon that, then you can make great things happen. So I'd say that a question that I would have is: would you say that Steve Jobs and the kind of things he produced, or was he, in my words, out of sync? Only, or clearly he wasn't out of sync. I think he was able to capitalize upon this forward-looking vision of his, and make it real. And when much of the world didn't quite see it, but now it does. It's kind of interesting, I think. Having an awareness that you're out of sync in some capacity. I think that true innovation, back to our innovation, and really more so I'm going to throw a bunch of other words, because innovation doesn't quite capture it, and those other words by themselves don't either. But invention, breakthroughs, what they call breakthrough types of things that actually disrupt things. If you're talking about the technology world, it's those kind of things. Those things don't really happen if you're not out of sync, and that needs to be coupled with knowing that you're out of sync and knowing how to bridge the gap.
So you've said in sync a number of times, and me being a child of the '80s wants to say bye bye bye, referencing the boy band. But I think that but we should probably move to time here. But you can't, like, there's no such thing as a well-behaved disruptor.
Yes, I agree.
There's no such thing as somebody who's driving the world forward in a meaningful way, who also, keeps regular hours. Or now, I don't keep regular hours, but I don't work incessantly anymore either. There's a sweet spot where it's, I sort of work when I'm motivated to do so, and then allow myself to rest when I'm not. But for me, there's intense periods of banging my head against it, then periods where I walk away, and during those rest periods, recovery is happening and insights are happening. They're just sort of back burner, and then you come back to it. I believe, and maybe this will be a good conversation for our next discussion. I believe that each time you restart, you gain. So if I were to put, say, over the course of this little thing I just developed, I'd probably put 10 hours of effort into it. If I put 10 hours of effort on one day into it, I would have gotten nowhere. The project layout was like 3 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour, and maybe one more hour, whatever makes 10. But that's how that worked out. Much more efficient than sitting down and trying to blast through something.
I couldn't agree more. And what comes to mind is there's a lot of value if you really understand what sleep over it means.
Yeah. And I guess we can. I'll sort of make my summation, then I'll ask you to make yours, and we'll dial out, or we'll conclude. But people say, "I'll think about it," and they say it as a throwaway. And generally, when I tell somebody, particularly in a technical sense, or one of my students, "I'll think about it," there's actually, that's a verb. That's not well, just go away and don't bother me till next time. I'll think about it means I'm going to sit down and I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to do some work. And then that work might not produce any artifacts, but I'm going to do some work, and I'll be in a better place when we meet again.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Beautifully
Okay.
said.
Well, thank you for listening. And until next time, this is the robotic Technicolor hot air balloon.
Thank you, Harrison.
Okay,